Hi, Karla here. Welcome back to my channel where I like to find the fun and magic in everyday things. Have you ever heard of smokeless incense? Neither had I. So I did a bit of research, and the more I learned, the more intrigued I became. So finally I decided that I was going to make my own smokeless incense cones to really figure out if they're worth all the hype. So come along and we'll experiment with making smokeless incense cones. We'll learn the pros and cons, and we'll compare it to traditional burning incense. Let's go have some fun. Smokeless incense made with charcoal has become quite popular in recent years because, as the name implies, it's smokeless. This is really great for people who are sensitive to smoke or who have respiratory issues. It's also perfect for indoor use, especially if you don't have a lot of ventilation in that area. When making smokeless incense, the recipes call for either bamboo charcoal or activated hardwood charcoal. Now, I'm using activated charcoal because of its therapeutic properties. One main benefit of activated charcoal is that it neutralizes and absorbs odors and impurities, which can help purify the air. And again, this is great for people who have allergies or asthma who want to enjoy incense but not have it exacerbate their symptoms. And another great benefit of incense is that it promotes relaxation and it reduces stress. So it just creates this calming environment. Okay. So now that we know the benefits or the pros of smokeless incense, let's talk about the cons. So a main con to smokeless incense cones is that it's hard to find. You may not find it readily in stores or on Amazon, which means your only option is to make it yourself. Another con is it is a mess to make, especially when you're using activated charcoal powder. It gets everywhere. So make sure you're wearing your old clothes or an apron before you dive into making your own smokeless incense cones. Another thing is that the scent may not be as strong as traditional incense just because there is no smoke, so it's not traveling up with the smoke. So the fragrance may be more subtle. So the final con is that smokeless incense may not be as satisfying as traditional burning incense because it doesn't have the smoke. If you're like me, I like to smoke cleanse, and using smokeless incense, it's a totally different experience. All right, so let's go get our hands dirty and let's make some smokeless incense cones. To get started, I searched for recipes to make smokeless incense cones. So for the first batch I made, I used the simplest recipe I found online, just using charcoal, xanthan gum, and essential oils. I formed the dough into cones and then I let it dry for a week. But when I tried to light it, it never really caught or burned. So, as the saying goes, if at first you don't succeed, try again. So then I looked and found another recipe. Now this one called for charcoal, mako powder as the binder, and resins. Again, I formed the dough into cones and let dry for a week. Now these would burn maybe 1/3 of the way and then go out. Something was definitely wrong. So I did some research to find out what I was doing wrong and what adjustments could I make. Well, first of all, the incense must be totally dry. If unsure, just let it dry for a longer period. So then I found some other advice to use a different heat source when trying to light it. So if you're using a lighter, try a match or a candle, because sometimes the lighter can be too hot and burn the incense off too quickly. Another suggestion that I found was to make sure the charcoal powder is ground super fine, because if it's coarse, it may not burn properly. And finally, to try adding a bit more binder, just to see if that worked. Well, since all of the other factors had been addressed, the only thing left was for me to try a recipe where I added more binder. So that's what I did. I created my own recipe, which increased the amount of Mako, which is the binder that I used, to a 1-to-1 ratio with the charcoal powder. I also added this resin blend I had on hand, as well as a little clove and geranium essential oil. I mixed everything well, made a dough, and then formed the dough into cones and let dry. While I was at it, I thought I would remix the first cones I made, which were made from charcoal, a little xanthan gum, and essential oils. And since these didn't really light at all, I thought I would add a bit of Mako binder. I was curious to see how the gum and Mako would work together. So I ground the cones into a fine powder, weighed it, and added about the same amount of Mako to the mix. I also added more patchouli essential oil and water to form the dough. Then I made cones. Sometimes I use my plastic frosting tip and wax paper to make the cones. Other times it just seemed faster to make them by hand. I finished making the cones and then I let them dry. Okay, so now I was on a roll. I remixed the second batch because not only did I not want it to go to waste, but it was a challenge. I wanted to make these cones work. So since the original recipe included Mako and resin already, I used half of its weight in Mako. I also added a little cinnamon and tangerine essential oil to the mix. I made a dough and formed cones. I can't wait to see which, if any of these cones work and what they smell like. That's the nature of incense making. You have to experiment to see what works. So let's check out the first remix with the gum and Mako mixture. Well, this time it does light and it stays lit for a bit, but then it just goes out again. Now I could keep relighting it, but that's pretty annoying. Because it went out so fast, I didn't get much of an aroma. So all in all, I didn't have much luck with the gum mixture. Now let's see how the second remix does with the added Mako binder. Ooh, this one lights and actually stays lit pretty much to the very end. The scent, it's subtle and slowly wafts through the small area. Not too shabby. So what about the new recipe I formulated? Well, it lit up easily and it stayed lit. It burned nice and hot all the way down and for a long time. The scent was subtle but really nice. Now, if you decide to make your own smokeless incense cones, try this recipe because for me, it was an all-around winner. So that was really fun for me to experiment making smokeless incense cones. What do I think about it? Well, for me, as I said earlier, I really enjoy the smoke, the satisfaction of the smoke. I like to do smoke cleansing. I like the way traditional incense fills the room with aroma quickly, which is different than the smokeless incense. It's very subtle. The smell, because there is no smoke, is going to be more subtle. But having said that, if I had allergies or some other respiratory illness, then smokeless incense would be great. Using the charcoal gives it other therapeutic properties in the air. So it just depends on what it is you like and what you need. So what do you think? Are you gonna try smokeless incense cones? Have you tried them in the past? Please let me know. I'd love to hear it. So let me know in the comments below what you think and if you've had experience using them in the past. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me on our next adventure.